All right, let's talk some Eagles football and a little bit of team dynamics with our guy Ross Tucker, the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, the Ross Tucker World Takeover with the multimedia star, both locally and nationally, and perhaps even internationally. Good morning, Ross.
Good morning, Joe. How are you?
Ross, what's it like to be a multimedia star?
I wouldn't know.
Yeah, you know what? See, I'm going to tell you why I know you are. Because the Reading Phillies have you throwing out the first pitch this week, and only stars throw out the first pitch.
Well, hold on a second.
Is this true?
Didn't they just have Jack and James do it like last week?
Yeah, that really submarines Joe's point. Like, it just crushes it.
I got to be honest with you guys, though. Well, I've never done it before, and I'm pretty sure there's something wrong with my rotator cuff.
Oh, no.
Sounds like Jack Fritz here.
He does.
And both my daughters retired from softball this year, so I haven't been, like, throwing or anything. I don't even know. Like, I texted Tom McCarthy to get his advice, and he said to go up on the mound, but I don't know if you're allowed to do that. I don't know what are my tips here. I'm sure, John, you and Joe have done
This is really simple, and I got 4 words for you, and it's going to sum the whole thing up. Suck it up, Buttercup.
Yeah.
That's it.
No, but am I allowed to go up on the mound? Because I would want to go up on the mound and do like the whole wind-up thing.
They don't let you go on the mound.
If you feel the need to switch arms, man. I switched throwing arms when I was 30. I had to switch. I was taught to throw righty by my dad, who didn't seem to notice that I write with my left hand and kick with my left foot and brush my teeth with my left. Yeah, I did everything with my left hand. My dad brought home the glove that covered my left hand for baseball.
So, John,
that was troubling.
Your advice is for me, for the first time I'm ever doing this in front of 8,000 people in Reading, you want me to throw it left-handed?
You could practice.
That's your advice?
You could practice in advance. That's what I did.
That's the worst. It's tomorrow night.
That's horrible.
That's the worst advice I've ever heard. Are you? So you know what it is,
that's
Joe?
What we did
John's
when we
trying
went
to get me to go viral.
Yeah.
That might go viral.
Yeah, John really did.
So you don't feel
there.
confident in your ability to. It's not far from in front of the mound. So if your shoulder is that bad, you could get it there with your left. I promise.
But I'm going to throw it even higher and harder than I think. Right, James? Is that you guys have all done it?
So the one caveat is they usually have a kid catching it. So,
oh boy.
Yeah, you don't feel like you want to whip it at them unless you're Jack Fritz, who absolutely whipped it at the kid and terrified him.
I think the caveat is the Reading Phillies are desperate that Seltzer, Fritz, and now Ross Tucker are all throwing out first pitches.
You're not wrong, Jack.
I think some farmer out there wasn't available that day. All right, Ross, let's get to it. I want to do a ton of Eagles with you, but let's actually start. I know you were listening on the way in, the Rob Thompson-Castellanos stuff. So let's just talk team dynamic, player, coach. Without having to name names, what's the craziest disrespectful thing you ever saw from a player to a coach in your years at any level of football? And look, football's in the pro level is totally different because there's only 16 your time, 17 games. Players rarely get, suspended or benched for a whole game. But what, in your opinion, that you saw merited, yeah, this guy should not be allowed to play the next game? And how often did the coach make that decision?
Well, it's funny because only 2 come to mind right away, and it's the same guy, and it's the same year, same team. The one was in the offensive line meeting room where he just basically totally emasculated the offensive line coach.
Wow.
And it was very, very uncomfortable. The other one was during walkthrough where he got face-to-face with the offensive coordinator and said, I've been here since before you got here. I'll be here long after you're gone. And then the OC said, the worst mistake I made was keeping you on the roster. I mean, it was intense. And actually, now that I think about it, football is, maybe it's because football is a little different. They did not discipline him for the next game. He might have been like a 6 or 7 time Pro Bowler at that point. He was kind of revered in the community. I don't think the community really knew maybe what he was like inside the building, but they should have done something.
Yeah.
It was very uncomfortable, and that cannot be allowed. And I feel like in football it's less likely. Baseball and the NBA, with these guys having these gigantic guaranteed contracts, maybe it's a little bit more common. But yeah, that's the worst I've seen, and I don't remember them, to my knowledge, Joe, I don't remember them disciplining him in any way.
Yeah, no, it doesn't surprise me. And again, when it's, if there's 162 games in that sport, maybe that player said, okay.
That's a dysfunctional organization.
Yeah, that's rough.
That
was bad.
Organization, so that organization must have lost exclusively then.
Well, you know what?
You
know what's interesting about it? They moved on from him after that year. And I think he was very surprised. They moved on from him. He actually ended up going somewhere else and starting for several years. But so maybe rather than discipline him, they just thought, okay, we're done with this guy. I'll say this:
that's such a huge move. Then great for them.
Yeah,
but it's unfortunate you have the. Let's put it this way: if Jimmy Butler wasn't such a pain in the butt, I'm sure the Sixers would have been more inclined to keep him. I mean, some players are just difficult. I mean,
listen, why do you think the Dolphins are trying to trade Jalen Ramsey? Yes. They just gave him a huge contract last year. They made him the highest paid corner in the NFL last year.
Yeah.
And they only did that, by the way, because Patrick Surtain got $24 million a year out in Denver. And the Dolphins knew, he's not going to be happy if he's not the highest paid guy. So he had like 2 or 3 years left on his deal. They extend him to give him $24.1 million. And he's still not happy. By the way, shout out to all the Dolphins players that were so happy the team got rid of Fangio last year.
You're not
shout
kidding.
out to all the. By the way, they've gotten rid of Javon Hollins now with the Giants. All the guys that came out on social media and were like, good riddance to Fangio. The Dolphins have kind of moved on from a lot of them now.
Yeah. All right, Ross Tucker with us here. So, Ross, let's get to the Eagles. And I know you had your eyes on the practice last week with the OTA. Give us 1 or 2 things that stood out to you the most, and then we'll drill down on certain position groups and all. But what really struck you the most with what you saw with that practice?
Yeah, 3 things definitely jump out. Number 1, just everybody being there and there being no drama or issues whatsoever. That is unusual, especially for a team that wins the Super Bowl, because usually after a team wins the Super Bowl, everybody thinks that like they're the reason why the team won the Super Bowl and they want this or they want that. But the Eagles do an incredible job of being so proactive with some of these guys ahead of time that to have no malcontents at all, I think every other team has at least one guy where there's an issue. So that's number 1. And then actually watching things, I spent a lot of time watching the O-line. And, Kenyon Green, this former first-round pick that they traded for in the Gardner-Johnson trade, he's working at third-string left guard. And so that is a long way to go to potentially being the starting right guard instead of Tyler Steen. So I know a lot of people have talked about it. Hey, he's going to Stoutland University, and maybe he's this year's Mekhi Becton. That might be the case. But, man, I feel like last year during minicamp and the lead up to training camp, I was hearing a lot of whispers about how much they liked Becton. For Kenyon Green to still be third string and at left guard, not even at right guard, where Steen is, that would surprise me if he ends up really competing for that job. I'd be surprised. That is Steen's job to lose.
How about that?
And then the last thing, just watching the Eagles out there, probably the most important thing for this team this year is that all the guys that kind of played their best in the playoffs, Hurts included, of course, but the guys that, Jordan Davis had sacks in the NFC Championship game and Super Bowl.
Nolan Smith would be an example
Nolan
of
Smith,
that.
Jalix Hunt, Joe.
Yeah.
I'll even say Jahan Dotson was making plays at the end. Ajama, who's going to step up for Milton Williams. They really need all those guys to pick up where they left off and then some. I think we assume that they're all going to. I don't know that that's the case. Like I think we all look at what happened in the playoffs, and certainly the Eagles picking up Jordan Davis's option, for 2026, that they're hoping what he did those last 2 games continues. But for the Eagles, in my mind, to have any chance to win the Super Bowl again this year, all those guys that really played by far their best in the playoffs, they have to be at least that good, if not better, this year.
So Kevin Patullo has been here for 5 years. Kevin Patullo, this is now his first year as the offensive coordinator, as the guy who's calling the plays and who's standing up there in front of the offense and installing the plays for, time and time again. So how much of an advantage, Ross, is it for this team, for Jalen, to have this familiarity? I know he's not the same play caller from last year, but Patullo was here and has been here with Jalen for 5 years. For quite some time now. Is that going to be noticeable this year? Jalen has had to sort of start from scratch every year except for the one time he had the repeat experience of offensive coordinator 2 years in a row with Shane Steichen that culminated in the loss in the Super Bowl. It was the 2021 and 2022 season that went to the 2023 Super Bowl, I believe. So how close to that feel can we get with Patullo in this role as offensive coordinator?
Well, I mean, considering Hurts isn't one of the 11 best athletes in Philly, I think he's going to struggle. Would be my guess. I'm kidding. I'm kidding
about that.
By the way, I'm still trying to figure out how Joe, the week before, I was listening, or maybe I saw on social media, how he said that Hurts was the 5th best quarterback in the NFL, but he's not one of the top 11 guys in the city. I don't understand that, but whatever.
A lot of good players.
Makes
Yeah,
sense.
I got you. All right, so no. The interesting thing about Patullo, John, is we can all sit here and we can all say it's great that he's been here the whole time. And certainly he has a lot of familiarity with what Sirianni wants. He knows Stoutland well and what they want to do in the run game. He knows what Hurts does well, knows what he doesn't do well. The only issue with that discussion, and I know you guys have talked about it before, is that it seems like every time the Eagles have done this in recent memory, whether it was Mike Groh when Frank Reich left, or Brian Johnson a couple years ago when Steichen left, it doesn't seem like the familiarity has worked out all that well. And I don't know why. These are all different people. But remember, Hurts had a really close relationship with Brian Johnson, who they elevated to OC. Ultimately, I think familiarity is good. There's no doubt about that.
But it's overrated, Ross.
No, it comes down to the guy.
Totally right.
Like we can all sit there. We can all sit there for 3 years and play a video game together, like Madden video game, right? But some of us are going to be better than others when the controller's actually in our hand and we're the one actually doing it. So Patullo, by the way, he might be amazing. He might be an incredible play caller. I don't know, to my knowledge, that he's ever done it before. Mm-hmm. So the advantage there, and the Eagles will show nothing in the preseason, the advantage there is that he will have some new wrinkles and that the defensive coordinators around the league will not have a book on him. The disadvantage is there's going to be growing pains. Like anybody doing any job for the first time in their life, he's going to make mistakes. He's going to learn from those mistakes. What the Eagles need is for him to learn from those mistakes as quickly as possible. Steichen had already done it a little bit before the big year. Certainly, Kellen Moore had been doing it for years. He's going to make mistakes early. I wouldn't be surprised if the Eagles were 2-2 after a month again. The goal is that Patullo learns from those mistakes quickly and does not make them again.
Yeah, Ross Tucker with us here. Ross, I want to go off the roster for a sec because there was a story about a month ago that cropped up, and I'm curious your perspective. So for all the talk about the tush push, and many people thinking the Eagles specifically were targeted because of their success, I think a far bigger thing is if the salary cap change goes through, where there's talk of the NFL trying to change the way teams like the Eagles, and there's not many of them to the Eagles' extent, spend so much extra cash, and sort of what I'll refer to as salary cap loopholes. I mean, it's technically in there, but ways that the Eagles, through Howie and Lurie's money, manage the management of the cap very effectively.
Right.
Do you think the Eagles are being targeted with this potential change? That the Eagles' success and Howie's greatness at it? Because years ago, what was it? Was it Wilt or Kareem where they're like, you can't dunk the ball because they're so good that you can't dunk the ball? Do you think the Eagles are being targeted with this potential change?
It's a terrific question. For those of you that aren't familiar, the Eagles put void years on a lot of their contracts, which enables them to spend way more cash than the salary cap for that year because they spread the cash they give in bonuses over the void years. I do not think, Joe, that the Eagles are being targeted and that this is a competitive. Well, here's the dichotomy. Most of the owners don't want to do that. Most of the owners want to make more money. And so they're not happy that they're being put at a disadvantage. You know, Lori, I've told you guys this before. I had a team, a very successful team, GM, tell me that his cash budget, meaning what his owner allows him to spend on players in a given year, is $20 million less than the Eagles.
That's a big difference.
That is a big difference. So I think that they're upset that they feel like, hey, in order to be as competitive or as good as the Eagles or some of these other teams, we're going to make less money and or make very little money. And the organizations that are entirely reliant on the football operations for their cash flow, for their family, they want to make more money. I mean, but it's a bigger thing than that because they're already talking, Joe, that the players are getting too much. Because as these percentages keep going up and the salary cap keeps going up, that 50% that the players get is becoming a lot. So I have heard multiple teams tell me the owners are starting to feel the squeeze of not making as much money as they'd like to. Wow. They still make plenty, but not making as much money as they'd like to. I think it's more about that than just targeting the Eagles, but it's like, hey, the Eagles have this advantage, but we don't want to do that because we want to pocket that $20 million.
It certainly would hurt them. If they harden that cap, so to speak, it certainly would help or would hurt the Eagles. There's no question.
Ross, yeah, I got one more thing for you, Joe. Go ahead, John.
I'm curious how good our edge guys are. We've got youth coming off both edges in Nolan Smith and Jalix Hunt. We're dependent on these guys to get a lot of production this year. Are they ready? How good are they? And how did they look when you've seen them in limited reps out there?
Very excited about both those guys. I was not in love with the Jalix Hunt pick. I thought a third-round developmental guy out of Houston Baptist or Houston Christian, I thought third round was a little bit rich. Man, how he knew what he was doing there. Because a guy with his physical traits, if he wasn't developmental, if he came out of Texas or Georgia, he would have been a first-round pick or maybe a second-round pick. But because he was developmental, the Eagles were able to get him in the third round, and they probably got him like a year ahead of time. I don't think they actually expected him to play it all last year. I think that they were targeting him playing this year after BG and Sweat were gone all along. I've had multiple people. BG came on my show and said Hunt's put on weight. So hopefully that, they think it's good weight. I'll also say this, to bring in guys like, people don't know a lot about these guys right now, but Ojulari and Uche, it's very important that you have third and fourth rushers. Uche has an 11.5 sack season. Ojulari, I believe, has 3 of his 4 years. He got at least 5.5 sacks, which is a really good number for a third guy. So the Eagles basically sold both those guys on, hey, look at the rest of our D-line. Look at Jalen Carter getting double-teamed. You just saw what Milton Williams did. You just saw what Sweat did. My guess, guys, is that there's probably a 50-50 chance on both those guys being able to really be productive and play well, which is why the Eagles went out and got 2. Yeah. Like, if it's 50-50, let's get 2 of them. They only need 1 of them really to work out.
Ross, good stuff, bud. We look forward to it. I mean, the season really isn't that far away. And needless to say, we'll be cranking it up as we get closer to training camp, which I guess is now in 5 weeks, I believe. So, Ross, good stuff. We look forward to talking to you soon. Thanks, pal.
Sounds great. Thanks, guys.
All right, there he is. Ross talking